Hi, my name is Paula Hodson. I'm a special education teacher in Northwest Iowa. Most of my students are middle and high school age students, and the focus of my research has been on comprehension skills of middle and high school students, a focus on special education instruction using language literacy curriculum. The problem I identified is that students with learning disabilities struggle with reading and continue to struggle with reading as they get older. According to the NAEP in 2017, only 37% of our fourth graders were actually at or proficient in the area of reading. So that's showing us that actually a majority of our fourth graders are in need of reading strategies. Then that majority continues to progress through upper elementary and into middle school. And we find that we still need some interventions to decrease that learning gap between them and their grade level peers. I found that both Wanzik and Kim and their colleagues stress the importance of finding interventions to combat that gap and address those foundational literacy skills. So why do this? Obviously, we know that reading is going to impact students throughout their entire lives. Student success and their future limitations are affected by literacy and reading skills. It's going to impact the jobs they have, the money they make, their ability to understand things that they're reading in everyday life. Additionally, this language literacy curriculum was purchased by my district before I was hired, and it was sitting in a cabinet. I didn't know much about it. It looked like a pretty complete program, so I thought I needed to look into it. When I did look into it, I found case studies that were done by the company that made it, Voyager Sopris Learning Group, and I found one study by a researcher named Green that found that after using it for over a semester, it was effective for students. So I thought, let's give this a try. Some other past interventions that I found focused on multiple needs for students. Decoding, fluency, comprehension, vocabulary was in there. So a few of them that I found included the Rewards Intermediate Program. Wanzik did this for an entire school year and saw small to moderate gains. Another program was called the Read 180 program. Kim and her colleagues had this program run in an after-school setting for approximately 23 weeks and saw a slight improvement in reading achievement there as well. A couple other studies that use the Read Naturally curriculum were a little shorter. Berkeley's study showed an effect size of 1.44 after just a month of instruction, which is amazing. But they not only used the Read Naturally curriculum, they also taught those students how to kind of overcome that idea that reading is too hard, I just can't do it. So they used some positive thinking strategies as well and saw an improvement in fluency. Graves and her colleagues reported comprehension skills improved using Read Naturally, but that it wasn't statistically significant. Some programs that just focus on fluency and comprehension included the Great Leaps program. Spencer and Manis did this for approximately 7 months, 10 days, or 10 minutes a day in a one-on-one setting, and saw small to moderate gains. The 6 R's strategy by Rennie was probably the most interesting study that I read, and it really focused on the concept of rereading when you don't understand something, which is something we all have to do, and then that relationship that you build with the person who is teaching you. So her study had pretty good success. It saw the students that participated saw increases in fluency, comprehension, and their accuracy in reading. The theoretical framework I focused on within this research plan was both cognitive and constructive learning theories. This requires that we look at how students learn, which is what we naturally do as special educators. Cognitive apprenticeship also borrows ideas from both the constructive and cognitive learning theories, breaks into pretty natural steps that we do as teachers, and then really focuses on what students are able to do when they are able to explore when we give them time. So the purpose of this study was to use LLC with a group of students that I teach that are in middle and high school. I hypothesized that low-achieving middle and high school special education students who received this LLC instruction would have improved reading comprehension. I used a single subject A-B research design. My independent variable was the instruction with and without language literacy curriculum, and my dependent variable was my students' reading achievement as measured by Ames-Webb-Mays comprehension passages. My participants were 6 middle and high school special education students. They were grades 6 through 11, 5 males, 1 female. All have identified learning disabilities, and all are reading at least 3 grade levels below their peers. Phase A was my phase that I did not use LLC. My materials were Scholastic Action student magazines, a grammar packet that came from 180 days of language for 3rd grade, and then various graphic organizers to help students when we responded to our reading through writing. Phase B, I used the language literacy curriculum that included the teacher's edition, the student textbooks, and the interactive workbooks for Book A. The kit also came with graphic organizers for writing and vocabulary, transparent square tiles for phonemic awareness activities, and then picture cards, letter cards, and Post-its for vocabulary and phonemic awareness activities as well. My assessment, as I mentioned before, was the Ames-Webb-Mays comprehension passage, and oral reading, fluency, and Ames-Webb-Mays assessments have been found to be generally equivalent. The procedure was to do an assessment, complete 5 weeks of Phase A, do an additional assessment, complete 5 weeks of Phase B where language literacy curriculum was used, and then complete a post-assessment. I analyzed my data using dependent t-tests to compare my scores. So I compared pre-test before Phase A to the pre-test before Phase B. So that would be when I was using Scholastic Action magazine. And then I compared the scores from the pre-test to Phase B to the post-test, and that would be when I was using LLC. If you look at this figure, you can actually see that when I was using that Scholastic magazine and grammar review, my students' scores improved. Phase B was when I started using the LLC, and there was a slight decrease. So what actually happened from the pre-test of Phase B to the post-test was that 3 out of my 6 students scored lower on that post-test. 2 out of 6 students scored the same. They didn't change. And 1 student's score increased, but only by 1 correct response. This averaged out to show that the students scored 1.5 points lower. My findings did not support the hypothesis that using LLC would improve student achievement, since the scores actually decreased or stayed the same for a majority of my students. The hypothesis that low-achieving middle and high school special education students who received LLC would have more improved reading comprehension than students who did not receive that instruction has been rejected. So my implications include implications for students, teachers, and administrators. First, students. I find that it's very important to motivate them and set goals. And this was difficult to do within LLC. I could see my students weren't very interested in it, and I had some struggles with the program and using it with integrity. How can I find ways for motivation for my students? And an additional implication for students is that if we as teachers can find ways to have them lead some of the instruction, that's going to be a way to motivate them. So if they're good with computers or technology, or if they're really big video gamers, for example, maybe we can somehow use that and let them lead part of the instruction, and that would be more motivating. Implications for teachers include sharing resources and strategies with other teachers. So within the LLC curriculum, I really did like pieces of the lessons, and I've shared that with some of my colleagues. Obviously, we have to keep student interests in mind when planning for instruction, not only in our literacy lessons, but also in finding books that they're interested in to keep them reading. So I have a dog here because one of my students is so smart when it comes to anything animal related. So I'm always trying to find books that have MP3s or are audio for her to read that are about animals because she loves it. And another one of my students loves anything basketball, soccer, football. So once again, ordering those books from different places is a great way to keep him reading. And then also we need to find ways to address students' gaps in learning in all settings. It's not just something that I need to be doing in the special education room. It's something that needs to be done throughout their entire school day. Implications for administration includes just purchasing and trying interventions. Maybe it's sharing intervention materials with other districts. And then scheduling intervention times. We know that this is happening in elementary and even in upper elementary, but it seems to kind of disappear after upper elementary. So what if we were able to double dip some of those students in middle school and high school so that they could attend 2 literacy classes instead of 1? Or what if there was a time in the day where they were able to come in for an extra 20 minutes of literacy instruction instead of 20 minutes of study hall? Seeing if we can figure those things out in the schedule. Limitations for this study, I had 4. The first limitation was the duration of the study. I kept it to 10 weeks, partially because of the confines of this class. Obviously, devoting additional time for the intervention might produce different results. I would recommend an entire semester or an extra class all year. From the research that I found, those studies seem to have better results. Also, my sample size was small. I used 6 special education students. In a larger school, maybe more students could be used with still keeping the groups small. So maybe 18 students, 3 groups of 6. You want to keep that small teacher-student ratio. For my assessment, I only used 1 assessment. Even though my curriculum, LLC, focused on all aspects of literacy, I chose to just focus on comprehension improvement. A recommendation for future research is that you could use a fluency assessment as well. We are working on fluency skills in LLC, so you could also be tracking fluency. And then my last limitation, I mentioned it a little earlier as well, is that it was difficult for me to keep my individual learning needs in mind. I know what works for my students, and some of what we were doing, it was difficult, like I said, to keep with the integrity of the program and engage my students. So a recommendation would be to find more ways to incorporate movement and technology into the lessons to keep students interested.